Liberal Currents presents Half the Answer with your hosts, Caitlin M. Green and Trent R. Nelson.
The happy days are here again, and you know that understanding a question is half an answer, and this is, of course, Half the Answer. Trent R. Nelson and Caitlin M. Green. You know what we both get into. We're both editors. Philosopher historian. Caitlin is a linguist. She's a mom. She's a book lister. And she's all about town. Costume designer. What can't you do? Caitlin.
We listed so many books.
Caitlin. You gotta hang out with us. Check out all the books. liberalcurrents.com. Well, Caitlin, Half the Answer's been so much fun. No matter if we know the slogan or not, we've gotten a chance. Yeah, it's fun. We do a lot of abstract stuff here. Well, it's been so much fun, Caitlin, because we've gotten to talk with so many wonderful people, sometimes twice. And well, today is in that same vein. Who do you have for us today?
Oh, Trent. Oh, you're going to regret asking me that question because I'm going to answer it. I've brought you another linguist, so buckle up. So I've got Hagen Blix here, a cognitive scientist, linguist, and AI researcher. And of course, we all remember the amazing book that he wrote along with Ingeborg Glimmer, which is Why We Fear AI. Thank you for holding it up, Hagen. It's such a good cover. It's the... who's the artist that does the hand? It was like a street art thing, right?
It's actually a Communist Party poster.
Oh, Communist Party, right?
In Germany, that is
this like
fascist hand,
grasping hand. But then you put another finger on it because it's about AI, right? Yes. And boy, did it take me a while to notice that sixth finger. I have to say, I feel like a real goofball. I think the Princess Bride would have ended after 20 minutes if I had been in it, because I would just never have recognized the six-fingered man.
Inconceivable.
Yes, Josh McPhee designed the cover. I really
thank you. Yeah, really nice job. Trent, I have to, before we start, I have to say, my parents asked me if you really mean it whenever you say happy days are here again. And I said yes. I said that's like just how Trent is. And then when I do it, I'm just like, you can tell it's not really behind the eyes. That I'm just like a poor facsimile of Trent being like, happy days, I guess, or whatever. Let's get on with it.
You gotta mean it. You gotta mean it. That's what we want. We're looking towards it. Happy days are here again.
Happy days. They are here again. We are living them. We are so happy.
The happiest.
Can you tell how happy we are?
Yeah. Yes. You can see the eye twitch through the webcam. So, Hagen, we are happy to see you, though, because you brought me this lovely little thesis, like wrapped up with a bow, which is how I really love to do these episodes, is to be like, we've got a point of view, and we're going to give our reasons for our point of view, and it's going to be really good. And so what you sent me was essentially the reason why you feel like deflating AI hype is not going to be the one thing that like saves us from AI bullshit, right? Because it is a legitimate thing to deflate AI hype, because AI hype is real and needs to be addressed. And so we have these amazing scholars and authors and people who go out and explain like, like stochastic parrots, right? We have Timid Gebru and Emily Bender talking about why it is that like a chatbot, an AI chatbot, or an LLM is not like a thinking, sentient being who can make decisions or explain itself to you. And that's really useful, because to trust an LLM for that is a mistake and could put you in some real danger, or could put other people in danger, or create misconceptions, things like that. But your angle is a little bit different. So do you mind kind of presenting that angle to us?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, as you said, I think it is clearly scholars like us and like Timnit and Emily, they're doing a really important job in like countering this narrative saying, oh, the machines are thinking, the machines are going to be smarter than us anytime soon, right? There's a technical literacy that is, I think, important, but it also, I think we've all experienced this, can really feel like a game of whack-a-mole. And in that sense, I feel like we're always on the back foot, right? Like we try to slap it down, but it's just impossible. I mean, like the amounts of money that they're putting into their propaganda is not something that we can really counter just on that level, right? So
Yeah.
I absolutely want to just like say advancing like technological literacy is important, but I also think it is in a very deep sense insufficient, because when we call these things hype, we kind of invite a certain amount of inferences, right? I mean, linguist to linguist, I think when you say, oh, AI is hype, people will often strengthen that into thinking, oh, AI is just hype, right? So you got to be careful in your critical approach to not kind of sell a false comfort. And I think a lot of people are very careful. So, but I think it's like really important to have this discussion. And so the thing that we've been thinking about, Ingeborg and me, and lots of other friends and people that are politically organized with, is kind of take this thing about hype is in a sense stuck in the technological sense, right? So on a technological level, of course, an LLM is a thing that produces statistically probable continuations of text, right? It's a machine for extracting statistical patterns from large amounts of training data, and then those patterns can be used to generate continuations. And sometimes people find these continuations very useful, and other times people find them very terrifying. And there's all the big structure of harm. But whenever we say this is hype, when we call it thinking, that's true. But there's a real sense in which that stays put in that technical evaluation level, right? Like, okay, we know that these models still don't really know what the word not means, because the word not has a very peculiar distribution, right? So these models are still not very good at, let's say, negation, right? So if you're in model evaluation, that's what you're going to point out. You're going to be like, oh, well, claiming that these things do natural language understanding in the same way that a human does is hype. But I think we need to go beyond that and think about the political project that these kinds of objects represent, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at Grok.
Let's look at Grok.
Yes.
We're gonna go for Mecha Hitler right out the gate, are we?
Right. Of course, you have to mention the fact that, when Elon Musk says, oh, it's the most truth-seeking AI or whatever he constantly likes to claim, that's nonsense, right?
Yeah.
But you can just call that a lie. But the political project is clearly one of influencing the public discourse in a particular way. And I think that we need to talk about the affordances that these tools produce, and that a lot of these affordances maybe are much more useful for a far-right project than for any other kind of project, right? So I think we can, at a very basic level, say that liberals and people to the left of liberalism tend to think that a good society involves some rational discourse, a good faith debate, a room for disagreement, where we can trust each other's intentions, at least, right? We can disagree, but we can trust each other's intentions, right? That's how ideally an academic debate goes, and I think in a free society, that's how we would make decisions about whether, I don't know, to phase out coal and oil or whatever. Right. Important decisions one has to make.
If we want the machines to do the painting, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That is exactly the kind of question, right? But you think about how the far right operates and how historic fascism has operated, is that they're not interested in good faith, right? Sartre has a really interesting text about how anti-Semitism functions on a psychological level for the anti-Semite, and the anti-Semite is always falling back onto the I'm just playing pattern, right? The anti-Semite isn't actually invested in the truth of something. The anti-Semite is invested in creating a kind of in-group, out-group thing through a kind of language game that isn't about rational discourse. It's about excluding people. It is about changing the discourse in such a way that the emotional valence of particular topics, right, the emotional response that people have gets changed, right, so that you can, and if that's your aim, then lying is always in the books, right? In fact, the fascists think that saying something truthful, being interested and invested in truth, is a kind of weakness, because they conceive of public debate not as a good faith disagreement where we try to come up with a solution that works for all of us, but as a kind of power struggle. And the power struggle means any weapon that you might have in your arsenal is good. If that's lying, that's fine. If that's constantly changing your position, moving the goalposts, that's fine, right? We see all of these things all the time. But now you go back to the LMs and you take the whole hype argument of, oh, they can't actually tell the truth, right? Of course they can't tell the truth. They have no representation of the world. They have statistical patterns of text. There's nothing in the model that corresponds to truth versus reality, insofar as we think truth versus reality is some kind of relation of correspondence between what we're saying and what is actually the case in the world, right?
Right.
So saying, well, models don't have truth is a real important technical claim that models don't have that kind of distinction. But when you think of the models not as technological projects, but as political projects, well, fascists don't care about that. For fascists, that's an affordance, right? And then you get Grok turning into Mecha Hitler and spreading anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, right?
Right. Okay.
Anti-Semitic conspiracy theories are not about truth, very obvious.
Right.
So let's talk about kind of, because Elon Musk is like kind of the least, let's say, dexterous or subtle about the way that he views Grok and the way that he deals with it, right? So like Grok will get a little bit out of pocket, right? And he'll immediately be like working on this. And then clearly he's like telling somebody to tweak something, right, in Grok, so that then you can immediately see a difference. And that right there, I think, is like evidence that he views Grok as like an ideological project, right? Where he's like, Grok said the wrong opinion, let's fix it. As opposed to like, I feel that my model doesn't simulate having a correct view of the universe. It's more like, oops, he messed up. So with Mecha Hitler, what happened is essentially he ahead of time said, oh, I'm going to change Grok to like dial back the political correctness, as if there's like a dial that you can like turn back. That's like, oh, Grok is self-censoring out of political correctness. Let's just turn it a couple notches down.
Well, I mean, to some degree, like, you can look at it because he's, as you noted, he's like pretty transparent in all of this, and he like notes that like Grok has been taking in too much from like the mainstream types of groups, and so the lobotomization of Grok like essentially is like stop him from getting that information, like seal, however that ends up working on that back end. Obviously I'm not familiar, but
so like part of what sparked all of this of like, Grok is woke, Grok is politically correct, was like people would ask it a question and it would say like, oh, well, Taylor Lorenz says this, or like, oh, well, Will Stancil says this. And then it would make people go, oh no, you're citing people we don't like. Right? Because the people who are using Grok are usually fairly right wing, right? And so they usually, the parody, right, is that under any post you'll see a bunch of comments on X being like, at Grok, is this true? At Grok, is this right? At Grok, what do you think? And then it'll reply. And if it cites people who they think of as liberals or left, then they get upset. And then Elon Musk said, okay, I'm going to make it less politically correct. And then immediately people started testing it and saying like, I forget exactly what the conversation was, but it was like, what population would you like blame for bad stuff that's happening? And Grok was like, oh, the Jews for sure. Right. Where, it was, I remember now. It was an account that it later turned out was a right-wing account that was trying to parody leftists that said that it was okay for like white children to die because all white children are colonizers, because they're white, right? And so then people were like, hey, if you wanted to like fix the problem of people like that account saying that kind of thing, what historical figure would you trust to do so? And Grok said, Hitler would handle this, would solve the problem, because that parody account had a Jewish sounding last name, right? And so that was like the conversation that made people kind of realize, oh, we can make Grok say some really Hitlery stuff if we just like ask it questions about populations and solutions and history. And it happily did so, right? And then people were like, hey, that's kind of Nazi-ish. And Grok just went all in and said, call me Mecha Hitler. And then, of course, everybody noticed, and Elon Musk was like working on this, and it doesn't say it's Mecha Hitler anymore. But it's a clear example of the way that like choosing not to be woke, statistically speaking, will lead an LLM to be like, Hitler, I guess? Apparently.
But again, as Hagen noted earlier, they're not searching for truth. They, when presented with facts from other people, they get all weirded out. They would like for Grok to be like, and I actually have this in an essay that is in the works, I think, for Liberal Currents.
Hey.
that hey, plug. They need the people that they demonize to be all of the bad things that they conceive them to be.
Well, and the right would rather have an LLM or something that's not a person and can't think, right? Than experts, because going out and seeking experts and trusting their viewpoint and doing the things that they recommend, that's woke, that's leftism, that's communism. So you can't do that. We have to we have to get the computer that nobody has yet answered this question for me. This is a tangent. I'm so sorry. But when Elon Musk first unveiled Grok and was like, it's called Grok, it's named after the grouchy robot from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is false, right? That robot's name is Marvin. And Grok is a verb from Stranger in a Strange Land, like not even the same author. And it means like to fully understand, which like I get why you would want to name your thing Grok, because it's about understanding ostensibly. Who came up with saying that false thing? Is that a joke to trigger nerds because they're nerds? Is it an in-joke among nerds that are like worse nerds than me? What's happening there? Like, why is it called Grok? And then they said it's the name of a robot from a different book series, one of my favorite book series. And so of course I got angry. What are they doing there? Is Hitchhiker's Guide left wing? Are they trying to make Hitchhiker's Guide fans mad? Can you answer this, Hagen? Do you know?
I do not know, but I would immediately assume that you take the premise from Hitchhiker's Guide, and there is a certain anti-colonialist strand to that, so clearly woke, right? I mean, saying we shouldn't bulldoze Earth for a highway,
right?
Clearly woke.
We've got to build bypasses. So okay, but then also if the right decides that they like something, they'll just say that it's anti-woke because they liked it, right? We've seen them do that in interviews and stuff where somebody's like, okay, but that's like an anti-war message, or like, oh, but that's an anti-slavery thing. And they're like, yeah, but it's anti-woke because it's good, right? Yeah. They do it with the Super Troopers movie.
There's also the possibility that that they're stupid and that they just
how dare you
misunderstand and misremember things. I'm gonna.
But you never know, right? Because like Hagen said, like they have fun getting us activated, right? So saying something stupid is one way to get us activated.
Also, I think that the center right from at least the old neoliberals like Milton Friedman have been to the far right one of the most successful strategies that they've deployed is make other people look condescending.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the anti-expert discourse, for example, is structured around that kind of stuff, right? And so we are like, oh, you don't know your classic sci-fi stories, and then we look at students that are like, pedantically complaining about the fact that you don't know that this is a verb, but you think it's a noun or whatever, right? And
Right.
Caitlin, you and me are intimately familiar with the kinds of nerds that care deeply
Yeah,
about the verbs,
and we walk
that
right
other
into the
people
trap
often
every
really
time.
don't.
And
That
I
is
can't
amazing.
help it, right? Because again, Hitchhiker's Guide is like a formative book series for me. Like as a teenager, I just like drank that shit right up, right? So of course, when somebody's like, oh yeah, we named it after the robot, I'm gonna go freak out. I can't help it. It's like in my blood, right? And then I'm the asshole. Cool. But I want to know who's responsible.
I do not
Like,
know. Maybe Grok
and
itself
yeah.
is responsible. It seems like the kind of thing that a language model would produce.
Right, they asked, he said, that's it.
It does feel, yeah, what's your name and why? And he's like, my name is Grok because of the robot from Hitchhiker's Guide. That's good. Well, it is kind of an excellent microcosm of like what Grok is, right? Where it's like, I'm just going to glue some stuff together. And if it makes you talk to me more, then that's great.
Right. And now we connect this project to the more general thing, like Steve Bannon famously calls that his strategy flooding the zone with shit. Right.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, yeah, the model may not be perfect at actually like doing linguistic entailment relations or whatever you think that, what a linguist would come up with a test for what does it mean to understand a language like a native speaker. The models are, not terrible, but they're not good in many ways, right? So we can go to the technical thing, but if you're asking, is this model a good tool to flood the zone with shit? You're like,
Yes.
I mean, I have a very hard time imagining anything that could be a better tool than Grok for flooding the zone with like right-wing propaganda, right? So in that sense, it's perfect. And like calling that hype is kind of, if you're stuck at that technical level, you're in danger of missing something really important about this political project. And we can talk about this in like lots of other domains, right? And this is an old fact. I think this precedes in many ways the particularities of current AI, LLMs, etc. Right? So if you go back to Virginia Eubanks, who wrote a great book called Automating Inequality, which is about the use of algorithmic tools to substitute for social services, to implement social services, etc. Right? And they're always sold as, oh, this is going to be more just, this is going to be more efficient, this is going to be more precise, this is going to be cheaper, and so on and so on and so on. But of course, what usually happens is that, people have a much harder time actually accessing the social services they need, right? So you have examples of them replacing the call centers for people who needed health insurance because they had low income, or that kind of stuff, right? And then the number of people actually got health insurance after they replaced it with like a robocall thing that was even before AI again, right? You can a flow chart kind of robocall.
The like phone tree, the like press 2 for this,
exactly. Right. So people had a much harder time accessing the social services. And of course, that was the plan all along, right? This difference between the sales pitch that says, oh, it's going to be easier and faster and cheaper and nicer, and then, but that the very same people that are implementing these policies are also otherwise trying to cut Medicaid, right? You know what their agenda is. The agenda isn't otherwise hidden, and we wouldn't call that hype. Talking about that in terms of hype would again be besides the point.
No, it perfectly does the thing that Chomsky always talks about, right? You make the service not function well, and then you go out and you complain about how terribly it functions.
Right.
Exactly. And then
you set up expectations that make no sense, right? Yeah. Where you're like, oh, efficiency, right? We're going to make everything way more efficient. And then it turns out that all you did was like fire a lot of people, and now it can't do what it was supposed to do, and then you go, oh, it's not fit for service, so we should just wind it down and like privatize.
Exactly. Yeah. So mentioning that there's lies is of course crucial, right? I mean, I'm in no way suggesting that we shouldn't call lies lies.
Right.
But we need to focus on what's the point of the lies and what kind of political project is being enacted there that the lies are in service of, and how does the politics flow in a sense, right? So one of the phrases that I really liked from Virginia Eubank's book was she suggested that these things happen in low rights environments first, right? People who can't hire a lawyer, right? If you are too poor to go to the doctor, you are likely too poor to get a lawyer, right? If you're a middle class person and that kind of stuff happens to you, well, you can defend yourself. But so these kinds of projects always target the most poor, the most vulnerable, the racialized people, and so on in our society first, right? And it's kind of often spreads out from there, right? Like once you have established that kind of thing, who you need to exert control over, whose right you can take away, and so on, kind of spreads out from there, right? And there's a great quote from one of the people she interviewed who back then said you should watch out for what's happening to us because at some point you're going to be next. Right. So to me, that's a great way also of thinking about within these kinds of the defense against these kinds of projects about solidarity. Right. It's like, of course we should be invested in defending the most vulnerable people for their sake out of an ethical impetus. But I think it's also perfectly reasonable to activate people based on saying exactly that. Right. Like,
yeah.
The line is going to keep moving. This is going to come for you. And right now we're seeing a lot of this stuff coming for everyone, right? I mean, I just read a Forbes story the other day about they're using an LLM within Doge. They want to cut 100,000 regulations at the federal level, right? So the principle is something like there's a law that requires certain regulations, and then the agencies implement these laws by actually writing the regulations. And so they want to find that the way they claim it is, of course, they want to find all the regulations that were written that aren't actually required by law. And they're using a language model because there's so many of them, right? But of course, the output is going to be like whatever. Maybe you'll get a certain amount of match, right? Like the language model is going to be perfect. But
I mean, Doge has already like fired people and then had to rehire them because it turned out they were essential, right? Like this just seems like turbocharging that process.
Right. But the point for these people isn't that they want to make the government more efficient.
Right.
The point is that they want to destroy parts of the government that give people rights, that produce environmental protections, that are in the way of profit making for the richest people in this country, right? They no longer believe that Keynesianism or the New Deal or any of those things that were supposed to create a kind of class compromise, that those are useful for them, right? They're engaging in class war from above. And so we should support that and not say, oh, they're hyping their products. Yeah, that's also happening. But that is kind of a very minor thing in the broader picture in a sense.
I think what we're seeing, and this kind of has been coming up in a few of our different episodes, is that there's a couple of different fronts on the sort of right-wing horizon, right? Where like we have these techno-feudalists, right, who they want to break down the democratic structures so that they can create these sort of like libertarian hellscapes where, you know, nobody has any rights except for them, nobody has any money except for them, like, you know, this sort of like hyper capitalist feudalist kind of ideology or goal. But then we also have the like white nationalist like intersecting with them, right, of like, but we want to have sort of like police control and military control over other people. And then we also have this sort of like religious right who, you know, want to create sort of a Christian nationalist, also a hellscape, right? They all want some flavor of hellscape. But that like, you know, there's like a few different things going on, and sort of the techno-feudalists are part of the ones doing the hype, right? Because they want to get people to accept AI as something that's amazing and wonderful. But they are also the ones who are trying to create this breakdown of services and breakdown of rights at the same time, right?
Right. I actually personally don't like the term techno-feudalists
Oh,
because
cool. Okay, tell me what
because
you
I
like.
think that you just called them both techno-feudalists and hyper-capitalists, right? And I
Sure.
think hyper-capitalist is actually totally right, right?
Okay.
What they want to do is to reduce the sense of rights
Mm-hmm.
to the only real right is property and maybe personal safety. But maybe even personal safety should be a thing that you buy on the market. Right? For
Right.
everything
Absolutely.
else, they're like, no, you should be buying everything you want. Should
Yeah,
be
I don't think they
subject
want the
to
rest
the
of us
market
to
for that.
have. Yeah.
Exactly. They're like they wanna replace the right to vote with like the right to buy laws with dollars, right? They're like, oh, the
Mhm.
market is the most efficient way of deciding anything, so therefore one person, one vote is bad. We should have
Yeah.
$1, one vote, right?
Right.
I, I mean, they we call that corruption in normal context, but they think that generalized corruption is actually the best way of organizing a government, right? That's kind
Right.
of how the libertarians think. They're like property is the only real core of rights. So I think
Yeah.
calling them hyper capitalists is exactly right because property and profit and wealth are at the core of that, as opposed to feudalism, which is kind of a system of very many like personal rights that are overlapping in the weirdest ways, but all the rights
Interrelated
are inherent
relationships.
to
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
person, right?
Yeah.
And I
Well, I
think
think about those freedom cities, right, where they kind of do want to have serfs, right, living in their little cities. But I think you're right. Hypercapitalism is more
And
appropriate.
yeah, I
well,
mean,
they want to have a proletariat, right? They want to have
right. I've always just looked at it more as though in the libertarian utopia, they would just like every community to essentially be a company town. You know,
right,
just like unlimited Gary Indianas, where like you work and they give you the company script and you go to the company store and you ask Rock if you can have like 3 cups of milk and then you like go back to your dorm. You know, it's
probably raw milk these days.
which,
Uh,
right, and Louis Pasteur is very upset. He's
he's
looking
just
down.
rolling in his grave.
He's like, "Bruh, why do you
Of
think I
course,
made
the
this shit?"
libertarians would say, "Well, you can move to the neighboring town where they pasteurize your milk."
Where they
I love
pasteurize it,
that.
right? So, yeah. Somebody in our local Facebook group posted asking where they can get raw milk. And I was just like watching the comments and seeing all the people recommend places where you can get it. And I was like, stop it, stop it. What do you like? I used to donate, this is maybe gross, but I used to donate breast milk because I overproduced, right? And I donated it to a milk bank and they pasteurized my milk because that is the safe way to give milk to people. Like, you don't know that cow. Come on, pasteurize it. Ugh.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I understand why people want to reach for the feudalism thing in the sense,
Mhm.
I think like when Varoufakis talks about techno-feudalism, he talks about the sense that there are big companies like Meta, Google, Amazon, etc., that are trying to create a relative monopoly space, right? They're not just making their profits by
Right.
producing a
Well,
thing, selling it over production costs, and then pocketing the difference. They're
yeah. And they
making
want to take over like a lot of the roles of government, right? So
right.
that's, I think, where that comes from.
Yes,
Right.
but again, that to me is like that's like that's like capitalism eating the government as a
Yeah.
structure that is kind of negotiating many different factions within the society that we live in, right? Like, I think the government, of course, does negotiate between the classes broadly construed, right? It's like, well, the rich people don't want to pay for health insurance for poor people, but, they also don't want pitchforks to come. So they're like, well, what's the minimum viable living standard that will make people not
Pitchfork
start
us.
burning
Right.
too many things down, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, in the history of this country, there's a lot of burning things down, but not not too many, right? But it also creates a lot of negotiations between like different groups of workers or different sectors of capital, right? Silicon Valley has different interests from, let's say, the oil manufacturers, and how these interests overlap, converge, or diverge. That changes over time, right? So one of the reasons that I think that tech, for example, used to have an interest in supporting things like universal basic income was because, well, they were selling advertisement, so for them, the more money people have in their pockets, the
Right.
better. Right now,
They
they're
weren't
now they're
consumers.
moving into with chatbots rather than just producing advertising. I think that a lot of them are considering working on weaponry, right? So that's special government contracts, or they're considering selling these as tools, right? So they're shifting more towards a Microsoft like strategy, right? And then the whole calculus changes, right? So a lot of these politics of these companies and how different sectors of capital relate, that's kind of what the state negotiates. And then there are people who are convinced that they would fare better in this particular mode of balancing different powers and different interests in society if they could just get their money involved directly, right? And that's, in a sense, substituting for the state as we've known it and over the last few decades, substituting a market approach to laws, right? And that's exactly the company Town Fantasy. And I think they're selling a lot of evangelicals, etc., on the idea that way they can make their own communities. They can be free from, let's say, federal laws that used to say that, people had a right to control their own bodies and get an abortion if they wanted to get one, right? Like, if that kind of overarching framework of universal rights, as we have struggled over for the last 2-3
you can establish years, like a religious freedom exclusion zone where like nobody
well, we might call them little fiefdoms if we were having fun.
Okay, so you mentioned this sort of shift over from trying to create a nation of consumers, right, to shifting into these like military kind of zones. And so I had the misfortune of reading an article on the Free Press, which was actually just a reproduced talk that was given by Palmer Luckey. Don't look him up on Google Images. You will not like it. It's a lot of loud shirts, my friend. I don't know what he's doing. He's got a look and he's committed to it. And it's like very vibrant Hawaiian shirts and a luxurious mullet. And I don't know. I think those are, but I think I will see them in my dreams tonight. And I'm not happy about that. They won't be good dreams.
Married to?
Who?
What?
Matt Getz.
Okay.
See, the mullet and the Hawaiian shirt, you can't tell which.
See, that's how he sells the rest of it, right? Yeah, he's taking fun things, party stuff, and he's like, and now I'm going to ruin your life. So, yeah, Palmer Luckey, right? He founded Oculus, right? He created those like VR headsets, sold that to Facebook, made a bunch of money there, got let go from Facebook. They won't really say why, but we know that he's been like a Trump supporter for a long time. Sometimes he'll say like, actually, I really like Gary Johnson. I'm a fan of like libertarianism and maybe, but he donated to Trump a few times. He's like worked with the Trump campaign. Clearly he's a Trump fan. So anyway, he went to National Taiwan University and he gave a talk to the students there because what he would really like is to sell them his new company, not to sell them the company, but to sell them on his new company, which is Anduril Industries. And the fact that it is a Lord of the Rings reference tells you immediately who's involved, and it's Peter Thiel, right? Because that guy is obsessed with Lord of the Rings, has somehow gleaned none of the lessons from it, but just loves to name stuff after it, right? So he's got Palantir, he's got Anduril. What else does he have? Like a bunch of nonsense. Anyway, yeah. So he went to National Taiwan University, Palmer Luckey did, and explained to them why they need AI for their weapon system. And so here's what he told them. He said, Taiwan is already a technology superpower. It must use this advantage to build super weapons. And it has Anduril's support to build a self-defense capacity through the development of high technology, fleets of robot submarines, scores of autonomous munitions, artificial intelligence-enabled strikes from hundreds of miles away. These are the capabilities Taiwan can develop to fashion itself into a veritable floating fortress. And then he says a bunch of other stuff, but then he goes on to say, I want you to close your eyes and imagine a scenario. In 2029, Xi Jinping orders the invasion of Taiwan. But after years of preparation, with support from strong allies and powerful partners, Taiwan is ready. Thousands of AI-powered drones spring toward the incoming Chinese fleet. Autonomous submarine systems and surface craft emerge from the sea to protect the island. Mass-producible missiles crowd the skies over Taiwan, stopping hundreds of Chinese fighter jets. The day is won. The military that the Chinese Communist Party spent decades to develop for that singular purpose, invading Taiwan, is destroyed for a generation, and Xi's so-called Chinese dream is dead with it. So he is definitely doing what you said, right? He's gone from selling like a VR headset, like a game system, to selling AI-powered war machines with the help of our favorite hyper-capitalist, Peter Thiel, right? It's a little scary and also sounds expensive. I don't know what Taiwan's answer would be to this.
And also
but he's
sounds
hoping
like
to
it
get the
doesn't
college students on board.
that sounds like the least functional plan. I mean, how much of all of those things would Taiwan need to produce to stop something like he's suggesting could happen? I mean, it's probably an incomprehensible amount of money and resources. Um, and
Right. And like a lot of humans from Taiwan would have to dedicate a lot more of their lives to military life, right? to make this happen.
Yeah, I think we're seeing this kind of across the board almost in big tech, and I think we should take that warmongering very, very seriously, right? And we should ask what the causes are, in a sense.
Yeah.
You know?
It seems like they would love for each individual nation to become armed to the teeth, right? To give all of their money to these companies to create these things instead of relying on, say, an international community, right, to help police each other and keep peace in that way through like diplomacy.
money, where's the money in that, Caitlin? Where's the money to be made?
Right. I think this actually connects back to the company town libertarian kind of conversation that we had. So Ingeborg and me are working on a somewhat longer piece on precisely this. So you can read Palmer Luckey. You can also try to read Peter Thiel himself, which
Boy, I've listened to him speak and it's not followable.
it feels. So I've had some conversations with psychotic people, and it makes me feel kind of similar. There's a sense of like when you're trying to follow, you're getting sucked into something that does.
It's like a vortex, right?
Yes.
Because like the effort of trying to follow the path that he's trying to carve and like the kind of stress as you understand what he's getting at, sort of like it makes you feel shaky.
Yes. But one of the obsessions that Peter Thiel has, which is, in my opinion, just a like recast version of classic National Socialist ideology, but
Yep.
he is very obsessed with the threat of what he calls a one world government, and he thinks that the primary figure that is maybe the Antichrist, because of course he's also an evangelical, is Greta Thunberg.
Yeah.
Right? Greta Thunberg is the antichrist who might bring about the one world government. Why? Why is that? Because, well, communism may have disappeared from the earth with the collapse of the Soviet Union, but the problems that are global in scale, like climate change, have not disappeared. And so people are advocating for global solutions to global problems. But Peter Thiel is very terrified of that. He thinks basically, that's the Judeo-Bolshevik world conspiracy returned,
Yep.
except this time it's wearing a green mantle instead of a red mantle. That's basically how he puts it. And then there's all these ways of thinking about solutions to that. And he's not alone in that. So one of the things that I found really terrifying and interesting to read was Dan Hendricks, who is, I believe, an AI safety advisor to Elon Musk, among other things. He's also very involved with like the effective altruism movement. Wrote a thing together with Eric Schmidt, the former Google CEO, who also for a while worked as the AI advisor for the U.S. military. He ran a commission. He also has his own weapons company that is trying to do AI drones. That also, I believe, has a Tolkien themed name, but I can't remember what it is right now. And
These
Alexander
guys, I
Warren,
swear.
who was just hired by Meta, who had his company bought. They wrote a thing about AI very much in the spirit of Henry Kissinger, because they think what we need for AI is an analogy to mutually assured destruction. So they call this, what do they call it? Mutually assured AI. What is it? Malfunction. Mutually assured AI malfunction. So they think that we should have, the same kind of game theoretic modeling where anybody trying to mess with anybody else's AI will trigger a kind of global meltdown. And that we should have this, built in with like all our weapon systems, etc., etc., etc. But the whole point of that is to think about how can we create a system in which we have those kinds of small libertarian structures that can produce any kind of stability. It's insane on so many levels, right?
Right.
The whole thing about mutually assured destruction is already okay. Even in the game theoretic things, on paper it works pretty well if you have like 2 players. With 3 players, it starts to get difficult. But now they actually want to have hundreds of players, and that's a much less stable kind of thing, right? Especially if you add some kind of noise into your channels in the game, as we know actually exists in the real world, right? There's a famous example of the time that the Russian radar installations mistook a flock of geese for a nuclear attack, and all the things said, no, you should fire the missiles. And fortunately, one guy was like, I don't want to fire the missiles. So that guy saved us from nuclear war, right? Like that has
Right.
and if you want to put that in the models, that's noise, right? So once the channels get noisy, once you sometimes get a false signal, the whole system becomes much less stable, and the more players, the less stable it is, right? But
well, or like you get one like kind of trigger happy, freaked out player, right? Like it's all that happens in the action movies all the time, where like one jittery cop fires off a shot and then the whole firefight begins, right?
Exactly. Right, but all these things seem to me very connected. This like deep desire to, I think ultimately, I always feel like it ultimately comes down to the fact that the super powerful, the ultra rich, realize that the tools that they have at their disposal are not going to stop climate change, right? And that's why. But they realize that the tools that we need will undermine their power, right? If we somehow got to the ability to, on a planet-wide scale, make the decision to phase out fossil fuel, well, then we presumably could make all kinds of other decisions democratically about, like, maybe we don't want to build tools that actually make everybody's life shit. Maybe we want to make tools that make work not just more efficient for profit making, but make work more pleasant and interesting. right? Maybe we don't want as people have been saying so much rightly, maybe we don't want the AI to do the art for us so that we can do the laundry, but we want the AI to do the laundry so that we have time for art.
Right.
All these kinds of things, right? But they're terrified of that thing that might undermine their power. And so they're grasping for all these different things. And then it kind of simultaneously, the other part is just, we're clearly seeing a new world of inter-imperialist rivalries, right? So there's a real sense in which China has stopped being the place where capital went for cheap labor, and China is now a high-tech country, right? I mean, with huge discrepancies within the country, but that's true of the U.S. as well, right? The U.S. has always had kind of internal colonies, both spatially and racially, of places that are extremely highly developed and places that are fairly underdeveloped, right? So there's a sense in which I think we really need to grapple with the question of where do inter-imperialist rivalries come from? And I think there's a real sense in which after World War II, the transition from classical colonialism to neo-colonialism, and after, like, there was space for investments to flow, right? The world kept getting gobbled up by capitalism in a sense. And then the Soviet Union fell, and China basically turned into a capitalist like economy with some state command on top, but essentially run by the profit motive, right? These are all for-profit companies, even if the state retains a certain amount of control over the people who run these companies. So in a sense, we're now at a moment where the planet has kind of been gobbled up, though. There's no outside anymore, and there's a famous argument from Rosa Luxemburg from the 1910s in which she argues that capitalism always needs this outside, and the reason it needs this outside is because you have to invest your profits, right? You're a company, you make a lot of money. What do you do with the money? You want the money to make more money again next year, right? That's kind of how the stock market and the whole system works, is that profits become new investments. But at some point, and that's much easier if you have a new place to invest into, because if you're kind of full, right? Let's imagine you're within one country and you somehow can't invest anywhere else. Well, let's say you're a car manufacturer, but the car market is saturated, right? Like, we're producing as many cars as people can buy, so you have to take over market share if you want to invest, or you're going to end up competing with your old factories, right? So building a new factory with your investments that's maybe more efficient would devalue the investments that you already have, right? So that's kind of the structure of why does the very basic structure of why does capitalism need an outside where it kind of can find new markets, new workers, and new places to invest where you don't compete with your own pre-existing investments. And that we've run out of this place, right? And both China and the US have like capacities of producing stuff that they want to sell, but the market is full. And now this conflict is rising and rising and rising, right? Because they keep making money, they don't know where to invest, right? That's also why the housing market is so crazy, I assume, because all this money has been flowing into existing houses that get sold at higher and higher and higher prices without any production actually happening, without new housing occurring, right? All these things, I think we really need to think about. What is the structure of the economy at large that gives rise to these political tensions? Because I am quite certain that as a species, we really can't afford to actually have a war between the US and China. And we need to figure out how to make these tensions go away, because a war between the US and China is a really terrifying prospect that, brings to mind that old Einstein quote of, I don't know, what weapons World War III is going to be fought with, but I know that World War IV is going to be fought with sticks and stones.
Yeah, it does feel very true.
Right. But
it's going to be AI submarines and AI missiles.
Palmer
Lucky
knows what weapons.
Palmer Lucky knows about World War III. Yeah.
Yes. Our dystopian capitalist hellscape. I mean, I don't know if we're going to be able to overcome all of this unless we are able to retrain ourselves differently. Because I mean, again, we're in this predicament to some degree because we fire the CEOs when they only hit 1.5% growth over a year. They were supposed to hit 3.25, right? And so somebody's got to pay for that 1.75, and that type of mindset is I think, or I'm starting to argue more, is actually like a form of nihilism,
Yeah.
where nothing matters except for these abstract numbers that we have to hit, whether it means firing grandma or starting a Holocaust or just like having everybody not think anymore. It's
Yeah,
really
all
really
sacrifices are worth it, right?
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yes. I I would push back just a little bit against calling it a mindset, just in the sense that you can change your mind and you can say no, 1.5% is maybe fine, maybe 0% is fine. I mean, we're already making money. If we make the same
Right.
amount of money this year as last year, sounds good, but the point is somebody else will grow, and the bigger you are, the more political and economic decision power you have. So it is not just that it's a mindset, is that following the mindset enables you to
Right.
have a larger impact on the overall decision power in society. So it's kind
It's
of
a
a
stratagem.
selecting system. The system
Yeah.
itself selects for that mindset,
Yeah.
right? The mindset isn't kind of prior. In a sense, the mindset, gets selected for in kind of an almost evolutionary sense
Yeah,
by
it's like the rules of the game more than like
exactly.
We
an
spoke
attitude.
about that's the same lesson that we spoke about last time we were here when we were talking about how the capitalists, in fact, make the decisions knowing that were they not to make the decisions, that there are a tranche of people behind them begging to be able to make those decisions because, as you noted,
Yeah,
we got to keep on getting that
that's
3.25%.
right. So then all you've achieved is that now you can't afford to pay the tuition for your kids' fancy school since the public
Yeah,
schools are defunded and they can't learn there.
yeah. Even
And
at
they're
United
not going to
Healthcare,
get into Harvard from there.
even at United Healthcare, I'm sure the people lined up to become the next CEO.
Right.
Right.
But they also
Right.
gave a lot of interviews about how like we're so nice. Please don't. We're really nice.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, CEOs are people in that way. Like most people, they do not like to be shot
Allegedly.
at.
Yeah, they would
Dude.
really rather not.
That's the one relatable thing, I feel like.
Certainly, it's not their income, sir. Certainly, it's not their income. But no one wants to get
Yeah.
shot.
Yeah, okay. So I wanted to touch on a couple of like weird AI news items before we go.
Please.
Like, did you see the American Historical Society put out their guiding principles for artificial intelligence? And so
I
they
saw that
said,
weird chart. Please tell us about
yeah, yeah. So the guiding principles. So like a couple of years ago, I think 2023, there was kind of a committee assembled. This is what academics do, right? We have a really pressing question. We're going to assemble a committee. They're going to meet every 6 months for like a couple years, and then they're going to come out with a chart. And here's our chart. And so basically, it is about like if you're going to submit some piece of historical research or some academic product, like a talk or a book chapter or a journal article or something. Here are the guidelines that the American Historical Society would like for you to apply. So it lists a few tasks and it says, here are some tasks that we consider to be acceptable use of AI. So, for example, ask generative AI to identify or summarize key points in an article before you read it. And they said that is acceptable without explicit citation because it implies that you're going to read the article before you write about it, right? So you're supposed to ask generative AI, like, what's in this article to let you know if you want to go ahead and read it and use it in your research, right? They said, yeah, you can do that. Can you use an AI chatbot as a writing partner to help generate and develop ideas? And they say, yes, but you might need to cite the AI chatbot as like a resource now because it generated some ideas for you to use. Can you ask generative AI to produce a starter bibliography? Yes, without explicit citation, only if each reference is checked and additional databases and sources are mined, right? So you need to babysit it. You can't just use it to do your bibliography. Can you ask generative AI to produce a historical image for a paper or presentation? Yes, but mark it as AI. Okay, so now we're in like medical paper with the image of the rat with the unreasonably large balls situation, where like now you may as well have just been like, here's a picture I doodled. Here's what I think the Battle of Agincourt was like. And then, yeah, can you ask generative AI to fix the structure or formatting of your footnotes? Yes, and you don't need to cite that you used AI for that. So this represents like an increased acceptance, I think, in these organizations, right? To use AI to influence the direction of your work.
Right.
And also the image one really bothers me, I have to say. Like, I guess I'm not a historian. I don't know if it's like okay to just to be like, and here's a doodle,
It's
you
not
know?
okay. It's not okay.
Yeah,
This is
thank you,
stupid.
Trent.
This is stupid, and I hate this. Just find a painting. Find something. I mean, there are. Look, from the 14th century, I once found like a horrible drawing that existed from that time period of people
Mhm.
eating grass during like the famine that occurred early in the 14th century. That is so much better than a high quality piece of shit with seven fingers. That because it's legit, because it's real, because
Trent,
somebody
it's 2025 now. It'll have 5 fingers, okay?
I just don't right. I just don't understand. And again, I know I sound so old right now, but I just don't understand why we cannot take pleasure in doing the things that we've
Right.
decided we'd
Well,
like
like
to do
doing
in
the
life.
archival digging, right? And like finding the
Right.
image that
That
was
used to
produced
be
at the time.
that used to be fun, and dare I say, that used to be a part of the learning process of
Yeah.
going through the thing, finding the painting, and then learning about like who did the painting, right, as you're like producing it. And so like that adds to the depth of your knowledge, the breadth of your knowledge.
Yeah.
And that is the type of thing that ideally for a historian is going to actually make people interested in history, because you're always hearing people say, well, history sucked, I hated that it was just a whole bunch of numbers and dates. But what you need to do as a historian is you need to tell them the fun thing. Like
Find the
they need to
story.
be interested in the thing, the life that the history has, because that's the only thing that has any real meaning for us. Rant over.
And here is where I admit, Hagen, that I've been trying to get Trent to do like a Caitlin style rant for a while. And I put that American Historical Association post in specifically to get one. And I got one. We did it, folks.
We got him.
We got him. Drop the balloons. Oh, yep, that felt good. See, it's not just me, folks. Trent has feelings too, and there they were.
I
So
was
on a
triggered.
meta level, I think that's,
Yeah.
like, I think it's worth critiquing this, but I think like on a meta level, as people who are skeptical of AI, I think it's really worth asking ourselves, what are we doing if we can't even get essentially academics
Mhm.
who have a totally different investment in like accuracy from the general population, right? If we can't even get an academic society to produce guidelines that we find reasonable, then
Right.
somehow it seems very obvious that our whack-a-mole strategy of like, oh, it's hype,
Yeah.
oh, the thing doesn't
It's
do
not.
truth, that
Right.
something about that is deeply, deeply not working, right? And that,
And yet again, right, this is like a governing body, right? Like it's
right,
yeah, that
and
like individuals being like, hey, you isn't really gonna
right.
stop
So,
them.
I think rather than just focusing on the technical thing, I think it's once again important to focus on what kind of political project is that, right? And I mean, I don't know if you've seen the Microsoft study. Microsoft recently published a study with some very silly measurements, try to look at what kind of professions AI is most likely to replace in the next, I don't remember, 5-10 years, maybe it was 20, I don't remember the time frame. But number 2 was historians.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, absolutely ludicrous. There's absolutely no way that language models
I know.
will
But
replace
meanwhile,
historians.
the AHA is like, here, let me open the door for you.
But if you rather than taking the, like, rather than putting yourself in the position of, I'm the one who wants to police how other people use this new tool, which is a very individualized thing,
Sure.
right? Like maybe at the level of the societies, it gets a little less individualized. But ultimately, if you're constantly doing this, you're putting yourself in exactly that position that we earlier talked about, right? You look like the pedantic person who's old, who doesn't understand new things, who wants to
Condescending.
police what other people are doing, who looks condescending. So rather than doing that, I think we should be focusing on the politics of this, which is like, this is a tool to devalue historical research and historians, and we should be opposing these particular uses of this tool on those principles. We should be defending ourselves as workers, because this is a tool for capital to dominate us and our work, right?
Right.
And then you get people on board because they have a self-interest, not because they're like, oh, I don't want to be bothered by those weirdos on Blue Sky who hate AI, so I'm not going to put in this stupid AI generated image. But if you're like, no, this is a tool for making historical scholarship less good, replace historians, get history teachers out of schools, like undermine.
You want to
whole
put
structure of
history under the control
Yeah.
of Grok? Like, no.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So talk about the politics of it. Talk about how the politics affect people's work life, the meaning of the work that they clearly value. Focus on these, and then I think that's a much more promising approach, where we don't put ourselves in the policing position, but we try to bring people to our side. We don't focus on too much in terms of technical details, right? Like, I personally am a person who is interested in the technical details. I find those fun.
Yeah.
But again, I also am aware deeply that lots of people don't find these fun, but find them kind of off-putting. And so telling people, yes, we absolutely need AI literacy to the point that people are like, no, this thing isn't thinking. This thing is producing contextually probable continuations of text based on some statistical mechanism, the details of which constantly change anyway. So you don't need to understand. You don't need to know, what different activation functions are in use for the neurons right now, or like how positional things work, or any of these things, right? You need to understand, no, this is a thing that extracts properties of text, or properties of images, or properties of videos, statistical properties about what kind of things occur in the realm of other things, and uses that kind of information to generate contextually probable continuations of text, right? I think that's important. Like, I am in no way saying we should abandon that, but that is kind of then use that to be like, what is that used for, right? What's the point of these political projects? Whether we're talking about politics, whether we're talking about the fascist affordances of these tools, whether we are talking about the way that Doge is using this to undermine the function of the regulatory aspects of the state, because lots of big companies don't want these regulations, right? I mean, again, they were already trying to destroy the EPA, right? There's all this. They're working on the Supreme Court to make sure that the EPA can't actually regulate all kinds of things that it is currently regulating, and so on, right? So fit it in these larger patterns. They're using a language model right now to filter through people's social media posts, right? The State Department is doing this. They're trying to find people who have talked about Palestine online, people on student visas in particular. Right, and okay, so you're like, well, if you're like in the hype mode, you're like, well, I mean, obviously the model won't be good at that, I mean, it will have a certain error rate. You can call that hype, but what is the State Department trying to produce? The State Department is trying to produce deportations, and it's trying to suppress a certain kind of speech, right? If we think
And it's
about
going to
this again,
succeed at that, right? Yeah.
if we think about this as a censorship tool, and this is like something that we also talk about at some length in the book. If you think about it as a tool for political oppression, these things work much better if they have a certain error rate. If you know exactly what kind of speech, what kind of keywords are suppressed, you're just going to get around it, right? I mean, we see this in the Chinese sphere a lot, right? The government puts certain terms on the ban list. People start developing euphemisms. People play with the phonology of Chinese. They use maybe a similar word that has a different tone. All these kinds of things, right? People know how the censorship works, and because they know how the censorship works, they know how to get around it. But now you have a language model that tries to find someone who does a certain kind of speech. That thing has an error rate. That error rate means everybody thinks, oh, it could be me. I better stay as far away from that kind of speech as possible, so that I just won't use the word Palestine at all, right? Like,
Right.
Yeah.
not even, I don't know, to talk about olive oils that I've sampled or whatever, whatever
Yeah.
else you might be talking about in that realm, right?
Right.
Maybe you're not even going to talk about Syria or Lebanon because, oh my God, right? So
Yeah.
if it, in that sense, again, it's the non-working on the technical level that we're constantly focusing on with our whack-a-mole that is actually enabling the political project, right? It's
Right.
the fact that it kind of works on a technical level
Yeah.
that makes it work perfectly as a tool for flooding the zone with shit, that makes it work perfectly as a tool for political censorship, that makes it
Yeah.
work quite well as a tool for wage depression, right? All these things we
Right.
should be focusing on that, because that affects people's lives in a very concrete and different way, and it's much less tiring. Like, if I constantly tell people, no, actually you need to figure out whether the thing works, but people don't. I mean, the experts, the people who are in these companies to figure out how do we measure how well a language model works, that's a really difficult task, right? They have like linguists with PhDs figuring out what part of syntax have these models
Right.
figured out and what parts have they not figured out. So it's not a task we can put on normal people.
Right.
They don't have the time or the training or the interest to figure out how do these models work on the inside? How do I figure out whether
Yeah.
it's working or not? All these kinds of things. Right? So don't run around policing people. Tell people here's what the thing is for. Here's how it's going to be used against us. And then we can organize against these uses on that basis.
Well, Hagen, I have a quick question. I know that we gotta wrap it up, but how would you go about um, trying to articulate to the people who are being propagandized that LLMs are actually coherent enough to be spoken to and responded to as though they are thinking for themselves as opposed to just retrieving words that the dumbest person you know wrote on the internet at some point? Because I think what you are saying in terms of trying to elucidate the people without making them feel as though they're being condescended to certainly is the best strategy going forward. But it seems as though there's already a lot of cord to unravel
Right?
to get there, right? We have to try to now convince people, and it's not just like lay people. Like it's like, you
No, it's
see
historian.
like idiot, right? You see you see his Matt Taibbi, you see historians, you see like stupid people, people you didn't think with as stupid, right? And they're like speaking to the thing as though it's you or me, and everyone is like, stop doing that. It's not going to
Oh yeah,
communicate with you in the way that you'd like.
we didn't even cover the MP in England, Mark Sewards, who's unveiled the AI British MP. Like, you can talk to me, but it's an AI chatbot service where, like, it's hard enough to get your MP to listen to you, right? This is like your representative in the US, right? Like, it's hard enough to get them to even answer your call or let you leave a message sometimes. Like, oh, cool, now it's going to be an AI chatbot who can say whatever an LLM can say about how valuable you are as a a citizen, as a constituent, and like, yeah, what exactly is that tool for then? Is it just to like get us out of his hair?
Probably. I mean, that's the only
Yeah,
effect it seems to have, right?
it's to deprive his constituents of their ability to have an impact on their
To
leadership,
produce
right?
the feeling of having been hurt without
Right.
Yeah.
having been hurt. Yeah,
Right.
of course. Yeah. No, Trent, I think that's a really excellent question about that. I think, in a sense, that there's a broader, much broader question of like what kind of parts of life experience do we use to activate people so that they want to be part of some kind of political activity that tries to make the world better, right? And that they feel like they can actually make a difference. And I think there's often the sense of maybe we can make a difference as a consumer, right? There's boycotts and so on. But my impression is that these never produce lasting, coherent, like social structures that have a political thing, right? They're not producing organizations. People take part in, they boycott Amazon on Prime Week, and they're happy, but you've not built any kind of political force. And I think that is a very broad pattern for consumption-based political organizing that doesn't universally hold, but that holds very often. And so focusing on people's individual chatbot consumption and telling them they're idiots for believing what the guy in the newspaper also believed,
Right.
it's just not effective. So I would ask them, well, how has this been impacting your work life, right? Like, I think lots of people have the experience of managers and bosses trying to push this onto people. In lots of
Correct.
sectors, people who are younger have the experience that the AI is really interfering with the hiring into junior positions, right? Like these kinds of things, and then you can talk about what kind of political project is there, and also that, like, as an individual, you can't really defend yourself against it, right? Like if this is a tool to make programmers cheaper because AI assisted programmers are maybe faster, and especially if the quality isn't so, if the quality demands are not very high, that individual programmer can't just say, well, I don't want to use it though, because then somebody else will be hired, right? So there's a sense in which competition, again, just like with the ruling class, competition among workers also enforces certain kinds of behaviors. And then the only way to, since the problem is one can't solve individually, the only way to engage with it is through becoming collective agents, like forming a union. Right, so figuring out where these tensions are for people personally, and where they can generate agency, right, and what
Yeah.
kind of things activate them, right? Is that dignity of the work you're doing, right? That's the thing that I've been talking to, like, therapists and social workers. They very often feel like the quality of the work they're doing is very important to their self-image, right? They're doing an important social task that they want to be good. As for lots of people's work is like that, right? Like people don't just do work only for the money, no matter what, like, certain economic theories may tell us, right? So figuring out for particular people what the tensions are, what the affordances are that they have in their life to maybe become active in larger groups. I mean, start with 2-3 people, whatever, but like figuring these kinds of things out, I think, is where one has to start. And I also think it's really important to say, like, that is something that people can only really figure out in their concrete situations. Like, we're not gonna be sitting here and write a book that ends up with a detailed flowchart solution that works for everyone. We can only think about, like, broad guidelines of how do I think about points that enable what kind of pushback, what kind of organizing, what kind of desire to become, an agent in structuring the future of, like, your life and the life of people around you, and larger politics, maybe, right?
Yeah, I think I can really see your vision here, right? Which is like focus on what it is that this these like AI incursions into our lives are for. Resist the devaluing of our labor, join together, emphasize the importance of humanity and human thought and care in the things that we produce for each other, right? And I think that's a really powerful way to sort of safeguard the value of our lives and livelihoods, I hope, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, do you have any final thoughts? I think we're about ready to wrap up, but I think that's I'm going to really be thinking about that as the main question I ask when I see a new thing about AI, right? It's like, what is the purpose of this? Why is this here? What's the political sort of agenda or goal that's being addressed here? Because I think that is really significant. Yeah. Thank you.
I think that was an excellent summary of the actual
Fantastic
discussion that we had. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, Hagen. We will talk to you again anytime you have something you want to bring up. I'm happy to be your soapbox.
Thank you, Hagen.
This has been Half the Answer, where understanding a question is half the answer. Did I get it right? I got it right, I think. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Half the Answer, presented by Liberal Currents. You can find Half the Answer anywhere you get your podcasts. Liberal Currents is an entirely listener and subscriber-funded publication, which includes programs like Half the Answer and Neon Liberalism. So, if you like what you've heard and wish to contribute, you may do so at liberalcurrents.com and through Patreon. And remember, understanding a question is half the answer.